has got the will to work for peace, and that's Prime Minister Abbas. And we'll work through the issues that are nettlesome, and there will be some big issues that come along. But the first thing that has to happen is the Palestinian people have got to realize there's hope in a free society, and that they choose the leader that is most likely to choose to back the leader that is most likely to deliver that hope. Carl.
Yeah. I want to ask you about something else in your State of the Union.
Okay.
You spoke, and got great applause from both sides of the aisle, about a new initiative in Africa for AIDS, and mentioned the figure $15 billion over 3 years. When the AIDS community and some of the activists got into the budget, they said when they saw your budget, they said it was really a little less than that. And these conversations have gone back and forth, and they said it was really more like $10 billion in new money. And then somebody told me it was really more like $400 million for the first year. I want to ask you here in the Rose Garden, will you reiterate that $15 billion figure and make sure personally that it's really delivered to Africa?
Yeah, I will, Carl, absolutely. $15 billion. Now, that's not new money. The person who said is $15 billion on top of that which we're already spending, or $10 billion on top of that which we're already spending equals the $15 billion. Secondly, there is some discussion about the first year budget. In other words, we didn't send up a budget, 15 over 5, we didn't send up $3 billion. We sent up something less than $3 billion because we didn't think the program could ramp up fast enough to absorb that amount of money early. So it's not, some people then have said, well, wait a minute. He doesn't believe what he said. Well, that's just simply not true. Matter of fact, after my trip to Africa, I know we're doing the right thing even more. But the OMB came up with a plan that allows for a smaller amount in the beginning. I think it's about a little less than $2.5 billion initially. And it ramps up more in the out years as the program is capable of absorbing a lot of money. You know, one of the things we looked for over there in Africa was whether or not countries could absorb money. In other words, for example, was the distribution system for antiretrovirals in place? It doesn't make any sense to load up on antiretrovirals if the distribution system won't get them out. In other words, there's some things some countries have to do to prepare for the arrival of a lot of money, and we recognize that, Carl. The commitment is there, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, we're doing the right thing in Africa. The American people have got to understand that we're a blessed country. And when we find the kind of suffering that exists in Africa, we will help. And we are. You want to ask a Liberian question? Please do.
Do you expect American troops to be landing in any large force in Liberia soon? And how far...
You're listening to a news conference from the White House in Washington by President Bush. This is VOA News Now.
First of all, the conditions that I laid out for the Liberian rescue mission still exist. Charles Taylor must go, ceasefire must be in place, and we will be there to help ECOWAS. And so we're working to get those conditions in place. And we will continue working to get them in place until they are in place, at which point we will then take the necessary steps to get ECOWAS in place so that we can deliver aid and help to suffering Liberians. I also want to remind you, I also said the troop strength will be limited and the time frame will be limited, and we're working on that. The idea, of course, is to go in, stabilize the situation, get the NGOs moving back into to their positions to be able to help deliver aid, and then work immediately with the United Nations to provide blue helmets, maybe blue helmets, some of the ECOWAS forces in place, provide other blue helmets, and that the United Nations would then take up the peacekeeping mission as well as the political mission in order to provide the framework for a transition to democracy, and hopefully that'll help stabilize the situation. I think it will. Hutch.
I wanted to ask you about Iran, one of your other countries in the axis of evil. One of the things we learned from that march to war is that when you start warning countries they better pay attention. Are we now in the early stages of a march to war in Iran, or are they more like in the category of North Korea?
No, look, I remember right after Iraq, the first thing that happened out of some writers' pens was that, oh no, they're getting ready to attack either Syria or Iran. You know, the march to war is this campaign that's just going to march everywhere. All options remain on the table. I believe that the best way to deal with the Iranians at this point in time is to convince others to join us in a clear declaration that the development of a nuclear weapon is not in their interests. I believe a free Iraq will affect the lives of Iranians. I want to thank the diaspora here in the United States, particularly in L.A., which reminds me my last question is going to go to Ed. And so you can prepare for it, Ed. We've got a lot of our fellow citizens who are in email contact, phone contact with people who live throughout Iran. And I want to thank them for that. Interestingly enough, there's a TV station that I think people have read about that is broadcast out of L.A. by one of our citizens. He or she has footed the bill. It's widely watched. The people of Iran are interested in freedom, and we stand by their side. We stand on the side of those who are desperate for freedom in Iran. We understand their frustrations in living in a society that is totalitarian in nature, and now is the time for the world to come together, Ron, to send a clear message. And so I spent time with Prime Minister Berlusconi on the ranch, and I talked to him about the need for the EU to send a very clear message along with the United States. As you know, some of you have been on the trips with me to Russia, and you remember me talking with my friend Vladimir Putin about the need to be mindful of the Iranians' desire to have a nuclear weapon. We're making progress there. I really believe that we can solve this issue peacefully, but this is an issue that's going to require a concerted effort by nations around the world to work with the United States, particularly in Europe, to speak clearly to the Iranian administration. The other thing that's interesting about Iran is that they do have Al-Qaeda. They've admitted they got Al-Qaeda. Now that's positive if the Al-Qaeda is not talking to anybody. I mean, I would rather them be held somewhere other than out moving around plotting and planning, and I would just hope the Iranians would listen to the requests of countries in their neighborhood to turn them over. In other words, some of the countries of origin for these Al-Qaeda operatives have asked for those Al-Qaeda detainees to be sent back to the country of origin. It would be very helpful for the Iranians to make that decision. Ed, last question. Hold on for a minute, please. Ed.
Good morning, Mr. President. Since California is on your mind, I'd like to ask you about the recall campaign. Since you're not only the leader of this country, but as someone who came into office under extraordinarily partisan circumstances, do you view this recall, which is funded almost entirely by one wealthy Republican who would like to be governor, as a legitimate democratic exercise? And do you have a candidate in this fight, since one of the potential successors is somebody you've backed before?
Ed, let me tell you how I view it. I got a lot of things in my mind, and I view it like a interested political observer would view it. It's kind of a phenomenon. We're not used to recalls in Texas, for example, thankfully. I think that, I think that the most important opinion is not mine, but it's the people of California. Their opinion is what matters on the recall. It's their decision to decide whether or not there will be a recall, which they decided. Now they get to decide who the governor's going to be, and that's really my only comment I got. Listen, thank you all very much for giving me a chance to come and answer some of your questions. For those of you who are traveling to Crawford, gosh, did you luck out, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
We've been listening to a news conference by President Bush from the Rose Garden at the White House in Washington. The president taking many questions today as he prepares to leave Saturday for a month-long stay.